Solomon was not just a king. He was not just a rich man. He was not just a ruler admired by nations. Solomon was the man who asked God for wisdom and received it to a measure the world never saw again. But the most striking thing is not what Solomon knew. It's what he warned against. Because throughout his life, Solomon understood something that many people only discover late, when they have already lost time, relationships, inner peace, or direction. Wisdom is useless if it doesn't transform the way one lives. Today, millions of people have information, advice, access to knowledge, but they still feel confused, tired, and directionless. And that happens because true wisdom is not about accumulating ideas, but about learning to walk with clarity. Solomon wrote to burn false illusions, to tear down human arrogance, to warn that a life without spiritual direction, no matter how successful it may seem, ends up empty inside. Many believe that wisdom is speaking beautifully. Others believe it is being right. But Solomon taught that real wisdom is revealed in decisions, in silences, in discipline, and in the fear of God. In this video, you will discover 7 teachings from Solomon that are not just pretty phrases to share. They are profound principles that can change the direction of your life if you are willing to listen with an open heart. These teachings were not written to entertain. They were written to confront, to order the mind, to align the soul. If you ever felt that you are doing everything right, but still something doesn't fit, if you have felt inner weariness, mental confusion, or a sense of moving forward without clarity, then this message did not reach you by chance. Solomon's wisdom does not shout. It does not impose itself. It does not run. It waits for those who are willing to stop, listen, and correct their course before it's too late. And as we progress through these 7 teachings, don't listen as someone who just wants to learn. Listen as someone who wants to live better, decide better, and walk with purpose. Because when wisdom arrives late, the price is always higher. Solomon understood something most people take years to accept. Talent opens doors, but only discipline sustains a life. Many start well because they have ease, intelligence, or charisma. But starting does not mean staying, and much less does it mean finishing well. Discipline is what decides who reaches the end with peace and who gets stuck on the path with frustration. Solomon observed entire generations waste incredible gifts for a simple reason. They didn't know how to govern themselves. Because a person can have a talent for speaking, but without discipline, they say too much. They can have a talent for working, but without discipline, they give up when they get tired. They can have a talent for leading, but without discipline, they let ego dominate them. Talent impresses men, discipline honors God. That's why Solomon taught that humanity's real problem is not a lack of capacity, but a lack of consistency. It's not a lack of opportunities, but the inability to maintain correct decisions when no one is watching. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is direction. It is what orders the mind when emotions run wild. It is what keeps the path clear when enthusiasm fades. It is what protects the future when the present becomes uncomfortable. Solomon understood that whoever lives only by talent becomes unstable. Today they want to, tomorrow they don't. Today they promise, tomorrow they justify. Today they start, tomorrow they quit. But whoever learns discipline builds a firm life, even if they advance slowly. Discipline teaches to get up even when you don't feel like it, to be silent when the impulse is to speak, to wait when the heart wants to rush, to obey when the explanation hasn't arrived yet. And here is a truth that confronts. God does not entrust great directions to undisciplined people. Not because God is unfair, but because a lack of discipline destroys even blessings. Solomon saw kingdoms fall not for lack of talent, but for lack of self-control. He saw families break not for lack of love, but for lack of constancy. He saw men lose everything not for lack of wisdom, but for not applying what they already knew. Discipline is a silent form of faith, because discipline is obeying today without yet seeing the result. And Solomon made it clear that whoever learns to govern their habits, their thoughts, and their reactions is much closer to a God-directed life than someone who only trusts in their talent. Because talent can take you far once, but only discipline takes you far every day. Solomon understood something that modern humans almost always ignore. Haste is not a sign of progress. It is a sign of inner disorder. Many people believe that moving fast is synonymous with success. But Solomon observed that haste pushes decisions prematurely, and premature decisions almost always generate long-term consequences. Haste is born when the heart desires results without a process, when the mind demands answers before maturity, when the ego gets ahead of wisdom. Solomon taught that whoever runs without direction does not go further. They only get tired faster. Because not everything that seems like an opportunity is won, and not everything that moves fast comes from God. Haste makes people choose without discernment, speak without thinking, trust without knowing, and act without consulting. And then, when the damage appears, they wonder why peace left. Solomon made it clear that wisdom is not manifested in speed, but in the ability to wait for the right moment. Waiting is not wasting time. Waiting is protecting the future. Haste builds sandcastles, wisdom builds foundations. Solomon observed that many people rush into what they are not yet prepared to sustain. They want the result without having formed the character. They want the reward without having learned the lesson. And when they arrive quickly, they don't know how to stay. Haste makes humans confuse anxiety with purpose. It makes them confuse urgency with calling. It makes them confuse desire with direction. That's why Solomon warned that whoever does not learn to wait ends up paying the price of immature decisions. Waiting teaches self-control. Waiting reveals intention. Waiting filters out what is not essential. Wisdom does not accelerate processes. Wisdom respects them. Solomon taught that God does not work under human pressure. God works with purpose, with order, and with time. And when a person learns to slow down their mind, to control their anxiety, and not to decide from emotional urgency, they begin to walk with a clarity that haste can never offer. Haste promises shortcuts, but wisdom guarantees stability. Because everything built in haste sooner or later requires repair. And Solomon made it clear that whoever learns to wait for the right time protects not only their decisions, but their peace, their future, and their relationship with God. Solomon understood that the most dangerous battle is not fought externally, but within the mind. Before a life becomes disordered outwardly, it first becomes disordered inwardly. Before a person loses their way, they first lose control of their thoughts. That's why Solomon taught that the mind is like a city. If it has no government, any thought enters, dominates, and destroys. An uncontrolled mind fills with noise, fear, impulses, and ill-conceived decisions. And when the mind governs poorly, the heart becomes confused and life gets out of balance. Many people believe their problem is the environment, circumstances, or others. But Solomon observed that the real problem is almost always internal. Unfiltered thoughts, undirected emotions, and boundless desires. Whoever does not learn to govern their mind ends up being governed by it. And an uncontrolled mind never leads to a stable life. Solomon taught that wisdom begins when a person learns to stop thoughts that do not edify them. Not everything that passes through the mind deserves to stay. Not every thought is true. Not every emotion is a command. The mind needs discipline as much as the body. It needs limits, it needs order. It needs silence. A mind full of comparisons loses peace. A mind full of worries loses clarity. A mind full of fears loses faith. That's why Solomon warned that whoever does not govern their mind loses decisions, relationships, and opportunities without realizing it. An ungoverned mind exaggerates problems, anticipates misfortunes, relives mistakes, and turns small doubts into big storms. But when a person learns to govern their thoughts, their life begins to align. Governing the mind is not denying reality. It is choosing how to interpret it. It is deciding which thoughts you feed and which you let die. Solomon understood that the future is built first in the mind. Before an action, there is an idea. Before a fall, there is a repeated thought. Before a victory, there is an internal decision. That's why he taught that wisdom protects the mind to protect life. A governed mind is not swept away by panic. It is not dominated by anger. It does not surrender to confusion. It learns to think calmly, to respond with prudence, and to decide with clarity. And when the mind is aligned, the path becomes clearer. Solomon made it clear that whoever learns to govern their mind not only protects their present, but secures their future. Because the mind that is not governed today will eventually lose its direction tomorrow. Solomon understood that not all progress comes from speaking more, but from knowing when to be silent at the right moment. In a world where everyone gives opinions, reacts, and responds immediately, silence has become rare, and for that very reason, powerful. Solomon taught that words have weight, and that using them without wisdom can destroy in seconds what took years to build. Many people believe that speaking is a sign of intelligence, but Solomon observed that speaking too much is often a sign of inner disorder. Because when the mind is not clear, the mouth gets ahead. And when the mouth gets ahead, wisdom lags behind. Silence is not weakness. Silence is self-control. Knowing when to be silent, when pride wants to defend itself, when emotion wants to explode, when anger wants to justify, is one of the highest forms of wisdom. Solomon saw friendships break due to unnecessary words. He saw conflicts grow due to impulsive responses. He saw opportunities lost due to phrases spoken at the wrong time. That's why he taught that silence, used with discernment, protects life, preserves peace, and prevents irreparable damage. Not everything deserves a response. Not every provocation deserves attention. Not every truth needs to be spoken at the moment. Wisdom knows when to speak, but also knows when silence honors God more than 1,000 words. Silence allows listening to God. Listening to others, listening to what haste prevents from perceiving. Many people speak to feel seen, to be right, to win arguments. But Solomon taught that wisdom does not seek to win debates, it seeks to preserve the heart. Silence creates space for reflection. It reduces errors, it cools emotions, and it reveals hidden intentions, both one's own and others. Whoever learns to be silent at the right moment learns to observe better. And whoever observes better decides better. Solomon understood that a misplaced word can destroy trust, but a well-placed silence can save relationships, avoid conflicts, and bring clarity. Silence does not mean absence of wisdom, it means maturity. It is the ability to choose peace instead of pride, discernment instead of impulse, and direction instead of confusion. And when a person learns to value the right silence, their life becomes lighter, their decisions firmer, and their path safer. Because it is not he who speaks the most who lives best, but he who knows when to be silent when wisdom demands it. Solomon was one of the richest men who ever lived. He had gold, palaces, influence, power, and recognition. And yet he left a warning that almost no one wants to hear. Wealth without spiritual direction does not free, it imprisons. Solomon understood that the problem is not having resources. The problem is not knowing what they are for. Because when money has no purpose, it begins to demand more than it offers. Many people believe that if they resolved their financial situation, they would automatically resolve their inner life. But Solomon saw the opposite. People with external abundance and internal emptiness. Wealth, when not aligned with wisdom, does not bring peace. It brings worry, it brings comparison, it brings fear of losing. Solomon observed that money amplifies what already exists in the heart. If there is gratitude, it amplifies gratitude. If there is insecurity, it amplifies insecurity. If there is disorder, it amplifies disorder. That's why he taught that accumulating without direction is like carrying unnecessary weight. The more you have, the more you fear losing. The more you earn, the more it demands. And the more it demands, the less you enjoy. Wealth without direction becomes an elegant cage. Outwardly, it looks like success. Inwardly, it feels like pressure. Solomon understood that humans were not created to serve money, but to wisely manage what God allows to pass through their hands. When wealth becomes the center, peace is displaced. When money dictates decisions, wisdom is silenced. And here is a profound truth. Many people don't need more resources, they need more direction. Because it is not the quantity that orders life, it is the purpose. Many people today have capacity, ideas, plans, and opportunities, but live with a constant feeling of inner confusion because they never stop to align their life with a clear spiritual direction. Solomon taught that when God is not at the center, no amount is enough. But when God leads, even little becomes stable. True wealth is not accumulating without meaning, but walking with clarity, peace, and purpose. Therefore, Solomon warned that wisdom protects more than gold, and direction is worth more than any treasure. Because money can facilitate the path, but only the wisdom of God can show where to walk. And when a person learns to seek direction before possession, their life ceases to be a senseless race and begins to become a firm, ordered, and peaceful path. Solomon taught that the true protection of a life does not come from strength but from wisdom. Strength can impose itself in a moment, but it doesn't know how to sustain itself over time. Strength wins arguments, but wisdom preserves relationships. Strength wins a battle, but wisdom prevents many that should never be fought. Solomon observed that strong people rely on their ability, on their character, on their determination. But wise people rely on guidance, because strength without wisdom becomes arrogance, and arrogance always leaves cracks. Wisdom, on the other hand, acts like a silent shield. It doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need to impose itself. It doesn't need to win to feel secure. Solomon taught that many falls do not occur due to lack of power, but due to overconfidence. When a person believes they can handle everything alone, they stop listening, they stop discerning, they stop consulting. And that's where the wear and tear begins. Strength pushes, wisdom guides. Strength responds from emotion, wisdom responds from understanding. Strength reacts, wisdom observes first. Solomon saw that those who live reacting end up exhausted, hurt, and confused. But those who live with wisdom learn to anticipate, to choose, and to protect themselves. Wisdom avoids impulsive decisions. It avoids mistaken alliances. It avoids words that later weigh heavily. It avoids paths that seem correct but lead to loss. And that is why it protects more than strength. A strong person can resist an attack. A wise person avoids being where the attack occurs. A strong person confronts the problem. A wise person understands why the problem appeared. Solomon made it clear that wisdom is a form of spiritual foresight. It is looking beyond the present moment and acting considering the future impact. Wisdom protects the mind from excessive pride, the heart from resentment, and life from decisions that will extract a high price later. Therefore, Solomon affirmed that it is better to be wise than powerful. Because power runs out, wisdom remains. And when a person learns to walk with wisdom, they don't need to prove their strength. Their life speaks for them. Wisdom does not shout, it does not push. It does not compete, it simply protects. And whoever lives protected by wisdom walks with more calm, decides with more clarity, and remains firm even when circumstances change. After observing life, power, wealth, pleasures, correct decisions, and irreversible mistakes, Solomon came to a conclusion that summarizes all his wisdom. It was not a light phrase. It was not a superficial idea. It was the result of a lifetime of experiences, successes, and falls. Solomon understood that true wisdom does not begin in the mind. It does not begin in intelligence. It does not begin in human experience. True wisdom begins in the fear of God. And this does not mean fear. It means reverence, awareness, recognition that God is above our ideas, plans, and desires. Solomon saw that human beings can know a lot and still live lost. They can understand principles and still make bad decisions. They can know truths and still walk far from peace. Because without God at the center, wisdom becomes incomplete. The fear of God sets limits where the ego wants to advance. It applies brakes where pride wants to rule. It brings order where the mind wants to control everything. Solomon understood that when a person recognizes God as authority, their decisions change. Their way of speaking changes. Their way of waiting changes. Their way of living changes. The fear of God does not take away freedom. It gives direction. It does not extinguish dreams. It orders them. It does not limit life. It protects it. Solomon saw that many people destroy their path not out of ignorance, but out of self-sufficiency. They believe they know enough. They believe they can do it alone. They believe they don't need to be accountable to anyone. But real wisdom begins when human beings accept that they are not the center of the universe. When God occupies the right place, everything else finds its balance. The fear of God teaches to wait when anxiety screams, to be silent when pride wants to speak, to obey when the explanation has not arrived, to trust when the path is still unclear. Solomon understood that whoever fears God does not live dominated by fear of the future, because they know that their life is not in the hands of chance, but under a higher direction. True wisdom does not consist in having all the answers, but in walking with the one who knows them. Therefore, after all he saw, lived and wrote, Solomon left this truth as the foundation of every well-directed life. Without the fear of God, knowledge becomes arrogance, wealth becomes a burden, strength becomes pride, and life loses meaning. But when the fear of God is present, wisdom flourishes, the mind becomes ordered, and the path becomes clear. Because the beginning of all wisdom is not to know more, but to recognize God as a guide. And when God guides, direction ceases to be a desperate search and becomes a firm, conscious, and peaceful walk. After reviewing these teachings, one clear truth remains. Solomon's wisdom was not written to be admired, it was written to be lived. Each of these principles points in the same direction, to order the mind, to align the heart, and to walk with purpose. Wisdom does not promise a life without problems. It promises a life with direction. And a life with direction is always lighter, firmer, and more at peace. Solomon did not write for those who only want to hear what is pleasing. He wrote for those who are willing to correct their course before getting more lost. Perhaps while listening to some of these teachings, you felt challenged. Perhaps you felt clarity. Perhaps you felt that something within you needed adjustment. That is no coincidence. Authentic wisdom always unsettles before it transforms. But when accepted, it brings rest, stability, and purpose. If today your life feels confusing, if your decisions seem heavy, if you feel you are moving forward but without clarity, remember this. Direction is not found by rushing, it is found by aligning. And Solomon made it clear that when God takes center stage, the mind becomes ordered, decisions are simplified, and the path becomes clearer. Now I want to invite you to something simple but important. If this message resonated with you, if any of these teachings touched your heart, support it with an action. Like this video, so that this message reaches more people. Save it to listen again when you need clarity. Share it with someone who is looking for direction in their life. And write in the comments, which of Solomon's teachings impacted you the most today? Your participation is not just interaction, it is a way of planting wisdom in more hearts. Because when wisdom is shared, direction multiplies.